One other date, the 13th of May, 1871, saw the passage of the Law of Guarantees, where the new government, the new Kingdom of Italy in possession of Rome, assured the Pope of personal inviolability and also could hold the Vatican, the Lateran, and also the summer residence of Castel Gandolfo. However, all three, according to this Law of Guarantees, would henceforth be the property of the Italian state, which would pay the Pope 3.5 million lira a year in compensation. The papal court would remain intact, the papal guard would remain intact, and the Pope would continue to maintain his own diplomatic service, and a diplomatic corps would continue to be accredited to the Holy See. The Vatican Post would continue, the Vatican Telegraph Office would continue, and so communication with the outside world was assured. None of this sat particularly well with Pope Pius IX, but one compromise that he did immediately accept was the right to appoint all Italian bishops. There were 237 dioceses in Italy at this time, so this is a very important right. Up to this time, King Victor Emmanuel II had claimed that right, and with the unification of Italy, it resided in his hands, but at this point they were transferred to the Holy See. And this appreciably increased the power of the pontificate over the church. However, neither Pius IX nor his Secretary of State, Cardinal Antonelli, could acquiesce in this new state of affairs, and they thought that there was no chance really for the spiritual kingdom of the papacy to continue without the guarantee of its temporal sovereignty. And it's for this reason that, henceforth, Pius IX never set foot outside the Vatican again, regarding himself as a prisoner. And he was followed in this by each of his successors through Pius XI, who finally came to an understanding with the Italian government, now in the hands of its capo di governo, the head of government, Mussolini, in the year 1929. And we will be looking in Lecture 22 at the Lateran Accords. Pius IX did have his support. For example, and I think this is extremely interesting, on the 12th of April, 1871, there was a provocative presentation of a signed tapestry to the Pope, who had by now confined himself to the Vatican, and the members of this commission, a very aristocratic commission, that handed the Pope this signed tapestry, well, this included Ignazio's sister-in-law, Agnese Boncompagni Ludovisi. She was born a Borghese. Her formal title was Duchess of Sora. Her husband, Rodolfo Boncompagni Ludovisi, was not yet Prince of Piombino. And it goes to show that even in the same family, how sentiments and political views could be so split. And this is of extreme interest because, on the one hand, you have Ignazio Boncompagni Ludovisi as a member of the provisional government to govern Rome, set up by the new Kingdom of Italy. On the other hand, you have this commission of women whose action, making this dedication to the Pope, was widely interpreted as a rejection of the results of 1870, namely, the final establishment of the Kingdom of Italy and the Pope's loss of temporal power. Pius IX, as we'll see, died in 1878, and one of his last acts was to remove the excommunication by which the king would have been barred from receiving his own last sacraments. In fact, Victor Emmanuel II predeceased Pius IX. When Pius IX himself died, and in fact actually had been buried some time, he was provisionally buried in St. Peter's, but his final resting place was to be the Church of San Lorenzo outside the walls. Well, in fearing protests, the church decided to move his body at night, but the procession was detected all the same. And what almost happened on the night of the 13th of July, 1881, was that the body of the Pope was almost flung into the Tiber by a hysterical anti-clerical mob. And Antonio Boncompagni Ludovisi, who outlived the Pope by a full 5 years, well, he never returned to Rome. He allegedly started a second family in Milan with one Maddalena Zanarini, and there were 3 children, who in fact actually had to be paid off by the legitimate Boncompagni Ludovisi heirs at his death in 1883. And this may explain what was going through the minds of his son, his eldest son, Rodolfo, and his siblings when they handed over the Villa Ludovisi for development in 1885. Their father had basically not set foot in it, thanks to his exile, for the 22 years that preceded his death. And the emotional attachment perhaps was at this point really with the Palazzo Piombino on the Corso, where Antonio had helped plan the events that led to the Roman Republic of 1849, and where he was situated at the time of his exile at the hands of the Pope in 1861. I should note that in the mid-19th century, if you look at travel guides, visitor guides to Rome, tourists are told to apply for admission to the Villa Ludovisi in order to see its art treasures at the Palazzo Piombino on the Corso. Well, the appraised value of the Palazzo Piombino on the Corso in the 19th century was not far behind that of the entire Villa Ludovisi. It was a very valuable property that was, in fact, expropriated by the new Comune of Rome, which then leveled it and left it as a vacant lot for 25 plus years. And that was just one of 4 Boncompagni Ludovisi properties in Rome that the Comune expropriated in the mid-1880s. In general, from September 1870, when Piedmontese forces finally entered Rome to remove it from papal control, well, the process of transforming Rome into a modern capital of the new United Italy proceeded with astonishing speed. And also, it's interesting to see how the relationship between the kings of Italy and how they followed explicitly the example of Napoleon and the popes. How they took advantage of the opportunities for legitimizing their rule by specifically restoring ancient Roman monuments, especially those in the Forum. Now, interestingly, though the Roman Republic of 1849 lasted only a few months, it still found time to prepare an enormous plan of excavations in the Forum, and the notion was to discover an authentic republican tradition in Italy. There was the thought that this excavation would help promote civic and national ideals and shine some light on the earlier history of Rome, and this was in contrast to the Pope's own idea that the real connection was between classical and Christian Rome. And, in fact, Pope Pius IX was the last pope to make a major intervention in the Forum, the rebuilding of the so-called Portico of the Harmonious Gods, which is an archaeological site which really is pure fantasy. The reconstruction does not correspond to any building that must have existed in antiquity. So, the principal excavations in the Forum then were to fall into the hands of the Kingdom of Italy, King Victor Emmanuel II, and then his son, King Umberto I, who reigned after the death of Emmanuel II in 1878, all the way to 1900 when he himself was assassinated. Well, it would make a long story and a very detailed story just to tell the story of public buildings in Rome during this period. This is the period starting in the 1870s that saw after a disastrous flood of specifically the year 1870, the new embankments at the Tiber, which in fact actually destroyed a good portion of old Rome near the river. And also building monstrous buildings such as this Palazzo della Giustizia, this Justice Palace, which dwarfed any of Bramante's designs for Pope Julius II for a similar structure, or this building, the Ministry of Education. And all these buildings, or each of these buildings rather, is still very much functioning as it was determined by the Kingdom of Italy. Or let's take this structure here, a public school called Regina Margherita, which was built in 1888, which cut off the facade quite purposely of a perfectly distinguished Roman church in Trastevere, that of the Madonna dell'Orto, and really one of the great sins of modern architecture in Rome, if you cut off the facade of a Baroque church, well, you're in trouble. And this is one thing that has gotten Richard Meyer, who constructed a modern Ara Pacis, completed in 2006, enclosure for the altar of peace of Augustus, that got him into trouble with this particular wall. Well, cutting off the facades of churches was nothing compared to what was going to transpire in the northern part of Rome. Let's take a look at the process that led to the destruction, and I think one can use that, of the Villa Ludovisi. We have any number of eyewitnesses to this development, and chief amongst them, Hermann Friedrich Grimm. He was a groundbreaking German art historian, with a special expertise in the art of Raphael and Michelangelo, but he saw himself quite seriously as the intellectual heir of Goethe. And he was born into an academic family, and you certainly know of his father Wilhelm and his uncle Jakob, who for their entire life shared the same roof, who were famous philologists and folklorists known as the Brothers Grimm, collecting folkloric stories, especially children's stories with bizarre content. In late January 1886, Hermann Grimm penned a letter, it was really a full-blown essay, entitled The Destruction of Rome, in which he strongly expressed his disapproval of how Rome was physically adapting itself to serve as the capital for the recently created Kingdom of Italy. And it saw publication first in March of that year, first originally published in German, but then with translation into Italian and English. And here Grimm reserved particular scorn for the tragic dismantlement of, quote, the most beautiful garden on the whole earth, the Villa Ludovisi. Well, here's a bit of necessary background, which I could tell only in outline. On the 10th of July, 1883, well, that saw the death in Milan, in a hotel, of Antonio Boncompagni Ludovisi, Prince of Piombino, just short of his 75th birthday. He left as his widow, Guglielmina, who was born as a Massimo, whom he had married a full 55 years previously. However, for reasons both political and personal, I said a bit about his second family in Milan, Antonio had spent almost the entire period from 1861, when he was exiled by Pius IX, to 1883 outside of Rome. Now, as heirs, Prince Antonio had two living sons, Rodolfo, born in 1832, who was to succeed his father as Prince of Piombino, and also Ignazio, born in 1845, and we've seen his activities fighting alongside Garibaldi in his Lazio campaign. And there were also three married daughters, who married into the Rospigliosi, the Boncompagni Ludovisi Ottoboni, a distant family branch at this point, and also the Taverna family. Well, the family's Villa Ludovisi at that point spread over some 247,000 square meters, and by some method, I'm not sure how, was reckoned with its buildings to be worth 14,645,000 lira. So in other words, 55 lira a square meter. One will remember that the Italian state assessed the total value of the Vatican, the Lateran, and also Castel Gandolfo at that point at 3.5 million lira a year. So you can see the total value of the Villa Ludovisi was quite high, even for purchase. Well, amazingly, as economic historian Stefano Palermo points out in a recent minute study of Boncompagni Ludovisi family finances in the 19th century, the Villa Ludovisi constituted only 7.7% of Prince Antonio Boncompagni Ludovisi's wealth. By paying off his co-heirs in cash to the tune of almost 3 million lira, Rodolfo Boncompagni Ludovisi, his eldest son, quickly became the sole proprietor of the villa, including the famed family museum with its dazzling collection of Greek and Roman sculptures. In any case, a law of the 28th of June, 1871, had established the indivisibility of art collections amongst heirs. Well, Palermo, in his 2007 book, Terra, Città, Finanza, well, he guides the reader through the vexing issues that the patrimony of the Villa Ludovisi presented in the political, legal, and economic context of post-unification Italy. In the event, on the 6th of April 1885, Rodolfo Boncompagni Ludovisi hammered out an agreement with the SGI, the Società Generale Immobiliare, in which he would form a partnership to sell the greater part of the Villa Ludovisi, to sell it for division into lots and then development as a new business and residential quarter for the city, adjoining those that had already been constructed, or were being constructed rather, under Rome's Piano Regolatore of 1883, this regulatory plan of 1883. Well, Rodolfo was clearly confident that the Comune of Rome would approve the scheme, since he started construction even before the vote of formal ratification was received from the Comune on the 12th of February, 1886. What is not often taken into consideration in discussing what's known as the lottizzazione of the villa, the chopping of it into lots, is the fact that the Comune had started in 1884 to make strenuous efforts to expropriate four of the family's properties in Rome, including its valuable Palazzo Piombino and the Via del Corso. Apparently, Rodolfo feared the prospect of losing that admirably situated palace right across from Palazzo Chigi, and then having to maintain a sprawling 17th century villa within the walls of Rome that his family, in any case, might also soon lose. So Prince Rodolfo devised a scheme in which he would immediately cash out, so to speak, on the historic Villa Ludovisi, but preserve the most architecturally significant bits, namely the Palazzo Grande and the Casino Aurora, as well as several buildings at the eastern end of the family's properties. Then, his plan was to expand the Palazzo Grande into an incomparably grander, fully modern residence to face what was to be the new Via Veneto. Well, the story of the building and the fate of that palace complex, which included a private light railway that was built to connect family residences, this new palazzo, with other family residences on the new Via Boncompagni, and also the financial disaster that ensued, well, it's a narrative unto itself.